Spencer Cox, Lieutenant Governor of the great state of Utah, thank you so much for being part of Three Questions.
Thank you, Bob. It's great to be here.
Now, you have said that Utah's government computer systems have been suffering hundreds of millions of attacks by hackers from China and Russia and elsewhere every day. What are you defining as an attack, and how successful are they?
Well, so our cybersecurity folks, they have monitoring software that lets them know every time there's some sort of attempt to penetrate our systems. And we're getting hundreds of millions of those a day. In fact, we finally we had a day where we topped 1 billion, and they're coming from all over. But the good news is none of them have been successful. We've been working very diligently over the past, really 5 or 6 years. We've stepped it up, and then especially this past year on the election side to make sure that we don't have any election vulnerabilities. And the good news is we've been working with the FBI and Homeland Security, both remotely and on site. They've come in, they've attempted to hack our systems, they've tested every potential vulnerability, and we got a clean bill of health, which is good news for the state of Utah.
Is the state of Utah's computer system being targeted purposely, and if so, why?
Yeah, so this is kind of just the new era that we live in, an era of cyber attacks. You have players from foreign countries and probably hackers internally who are just looking for ways to disrupt and get personal information from people. And so every state is like this. Our federal government, we're under this constant state of attack. For whatever reason, here in Utah, we get a little more of that, probably because we have Hill Air Force Base here. You know, there's a National Security Administration site here as well. So that may be part of it, but the good news is that we've taken the precautions necessary to protect against any sort of attack.
Proposition 2, the medical marijuana initiative, has been very divisive this election season. Your office has been sued by folks trying to keep it off the ballot. There's an awful lot of money being spent on both sides of the issue to either pass it or defeat it. Governor Herbert says he's voting no on it. How are you going to vote?
Well, I'm probably voting no on it as well. This is something that has been very divisive, and let me explain a little bit. First of all, it's the first time we've had more than one proposition on the ballot. We actually have 3 propositions on the ballot this year, so it's getting a lot of attention. But medical marijuana is one of those that people are passionate about. They have strong feelings. The governor and I both support medical marijuana, and the governor has also said, and I support this, that whether it passes or not, we are going to use the bully pulpit to work with the legislature to get something done that is the right policy for the state of Utah. So people want it, most people, Bob, really want it to be just like any other medication. You go to your doctor says this will work for you, go to a pharmacy and you get that prescription filled. It's been made more difficult because the federal government still has it listed as a scheduled drug that makes it impossible for pharmacies to dispense it. And so we're working through that with our federal partners, but we believe we can do something here in the state of Utah that we can actually do it right, that won't lead to abuse with young people and won't be too, it won't be sold on the streets, but that actually people will be able to go to their doctor and get a prescription like anything else. We think that's what people want. It's what we want. And there are some problems. Even the people that ran the initiative admit there are some problems with Prop 2. And so I say this, look, if it passes, we'll fix those problems and we'll work together with them to fix it. If it doesn't pass, we'll get it done anyway.
Are the divisions over the medical marijuana issue more generational than political? And if so, how do you resolve that?
You know, it's interesting. I used to think it was generational, but we're really not seeing that as much anymore. We are seeing support for true medical marijuana really across the board. And I think we're seeing it with an older generation now as they're aging, bodies are breaking down, they're starting to have problems and chronic pain and some of these other issues where they're looking for some sort of relief. And look, we know that opioids are killing people, that opioids are far more dangerous than we understood before. And so people see this as another avenue. And so I don't think there's a divide. When it comes to recreational use of marijuana, I think there is more of a divide. That's not what is on the ballot. And I think that most leaders, and the governor included, want to make sure that that's not the direction we're going, but it is truly medical marijuana.
I've read that in states that have legalized both medical and recreational marijuana, opioid overdose deaths have actually markedly decreased. Now, we've had some recent good news in that Utah's opioid crisis, the overdose overdose deaths have been decreasing as well, and yet the medical marijuana and the recreational marijuana questions remain unresolved here. What do you see as going on with this issue?
Yeah, well, so the good news is, yes, as you mentioned, this past week we just announced that we have seen significant decreases in overdose deaths for heroin and opioids. And that's a really big deal. We're one of only 9 states that have seen that. And so, again, my hope is that if we do get true medical marijuana, we'll be able to see those numbers decrease even more. And I know that that's something that many people are looking at. They're still studying that in other states, seeing exactly if there may be a correlation, but is there a direct result of that? And there's a good chance that there is. And so we're very hopeful that we can get this done and get it done right. Again, with parties on both sides of this issue coming together and finding the best policy for the state of Utah.
Utah has struggled this wildfire season. I mean, the drought doesn't make it any easier. You have been critical in the past of the U.S. Forest Service and its decision to let the Pole Creek and Bald Mountain fires just burn and then until they burn out of control. What would you like to see done so that we don't repeat what happened this year?
The answer is very simple. And the good news is that we do have a great relationship on some of our forests, better than some of our others, with the forest managers. It's very easy. All we want is collaboration. We want to be able to work together. We have a state fire warden. We have local fire wardens and local fire officials who understand and have known these forests for generations. The frustration comes from people like me and others at the local level, farmers and others who know how dry it was this year. I actually support prescribed burns and allowing some burning to happen on certain federal lands. We need more of that. But you have to be smart about it. You have to be practical about it. You don't do it when you're having the worst drought since the 70s and maybe longer in some of our areas. That's not the smart time to do it. Years like last year, much better time. And if we're having those conversations, if we're collaborating, then we'll have each other's back. And then if things happen, if accidents happen and fire jumps those fire lines, we'll be able to work together to make sure that we take care of things. What happened this year was not that. There was no collaboration. There was no discussion. Decisions were made without talking with state officials. And then when it jumped the lines, when they finally did talk to us, we told them they were making a mistake and they didn't listen. And we ended up where we are, unfortunately. We do believe that this will lead to better collaboration. The governor was just back in Washington, D.C. He met with Secretary Perdue, and they've had this discussion. We feel very confident that those discussions at the local level will start happening in the future.
Operation Rio Grande is now a year old, and the neighborhoods predicted back when it started that the criminal element would be filtering into the neighborhoods, and now we're seeing that, yeah, that's happening. How would you assess what's going on, and how would you measure the success of Operation Rio Grande so far?
Yeah, well, the verdict is still out on that the jury's still out. The verdict we don't have yet for a little while because of some additional changes that are still happening that were preparation as we close the road home downtown and open the new resource centers, the new shelters, 3 of them dispersed throughout the valley. That's when we'll really get a feel for how successful Operation Rio Grande has been. As far as the disbursement goes, we knew there would be some of that. In fact, we have resources available. So when a local police chief calls us and lets us know that there are new encampments, we're out there and we're on it as quickly as possible. One of the interesting things, Bob, is that the disbursement actually hasn't been as much as we thought. We got a lot of calls saying, hey, you guys got to get out here. We have this disbursement. Come and see what happened. We would go out there and find out that many of these camps had been there for 10 years. People just didn't pay attention to it or notice it. With Operation Rio Grande and the coverage that the media has given, we're getting a lot more attention to this, which is positive. It means that people are paying attention, realizing that we have an issue, and we're working together to get solutions. I can tell you that the numbers are incredible for the first year. The highest crimes, the worst crimes in the felonies, the violent felonies are down 25% citywide. And city officials and police officers will tell you that's directly attributed to what's happening in Rio Grande. Those numbers exceeded our wildest expectations. Now, we're not there. We still have a lot of work to do. But more important to me is treatment beds. We've doubled the treatment beds for those who are struggling with addiction, those who have mental health issues. We're getting them the actual treatment they need so they can get out of homelessness, get away from addiction, get back on their feet. And then we're actually helping them find jobs. That was phase 3. It's changing lives and it's making a difference.
Governor Herbert has not quite decided, or at least announced publicly yet, whether he's going to run for re-election in 2020. Depending on what he does, are you going to run for governor?
Well, that's the question I get asked the most often, and I'll tell you what I tell people privately and publicly, and that is that it's way too early to make that decision. As you mentioned, we're right in the middle of an election. This is the election for 2016. One of the things I hate most about, or 2018.
Yeah,
I see, right. I'm 2018. One of the things I hate most about our political system right now is we are in a constant state of election, or re-election. I said 2016 because I started getting these questions in January of 2016. When we were just starting the next 4 years of our administration. And so when the time is right, we will sit down. The governor has talked to me about that, asked me if I would be willing to run. I've given him the same answer. I will tell you that we're leaning that direction, and when the time is right, we'll know.
The national attention has been on U.S. Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh and the hearings going on in the Senate committee. Have you been watching that, number one, and number two, where do you think the truth lies there?
I have been watching as much as I can stomach. It's so divisive. I mentioned earlier, it feels like one of those exams that a professor would come up with that's impossible, with no answer. It feels to me like both of them truly believe what they're saying, and memory's an interesting thing, especially memory mixed with alcohol. I feel confident that we'll never know exactly what happened 35 years ago, and that's unfortunate. And I hope that this is a cautionary tale for people everywhere and young people everywhere that our actions have consequences, and the use and abuse of alcohol at early ages has consequences, and hopefully we can. I keep thinking we're at the national level in national politics, we may have reached the bottom, and we can start up the other side, but I'm starting to worry that there isn't a bottom. I've referred to Washington, D.C. as a dumpster fire, but that's probably not fair to dumpster fires. So we have, it's pretty nasty back there. And the good news is, here in the state of Utah, we don't see that type of politics of destruction on both sides. People working together. There are great things happening, and there is reason for optimism here in Utah.
You've been watching, no doubt, the efforts to establish an inland port here in Salt Lake City. Now, there has been a big rush to move forward, despite concerns about the environment and infrastructure and culture and et cetera. Is an inland port good for the state of Utah?
Well, I think it is good, and what's interesting is even those that have some concerns with it are fairly supportive of the idea of an inland port. So Salt Lake City and Salt Lake City's mayor are very supportive of an inland port. They were unhappy with kind of the way it came about through the legislative process, which is why we had a special session in July. That special session was called by the governor to resolve those concerns. Some of the environmental concerns were resolved there. Some of the other issues, the representation issues, were resolved there. So we're very excited to see that that's been resolved. There are still some concerns, and the governor has shared those with transparency of the board, making sure that the board is very transparent, that their meetings are open to the public and the press. We continue to press forward on that. Overall, though, it is a good idea. Look, Utah's economy is doing phenomenally well, and one of the reasons for that is our exports. You look at the growth that we have had with our international exports over the past 5 years and 10 years, just exponential increases. An inland port gives us the ability to enhance those exports in a very positive way. And when I had a chance to go to London to the big air show, the biggest air show in the world, and Utah's on a map in a way it's never been on the map before. And talking with Boeing, who's going to be announcing a new plane very soon, and Utah's on the radar as possibly being the place to manufacture that plane, which would be huge for Utah. When they hear about the potential for an inland port, they get excited for manufacturing. That's a big deal for workers, employees, for school children here in the state of Utah, and we can do it in a very environmentally friendly way.
Spencer Cox, Lieutenant Governor of the great state of Utah, thank you so much for being part of 3 Questions.
Thank you, Bob.